Okay, so segueing to another conflict that broke out on October 7th, which is actually my birthday. Seems like my birthday is a big day for conflicts. It's also the day that the United States decided to invade Afghanistan in 2001, October
It's
7th. I was
also
at the
it's
laser
it's
tag in
also
Colorado Springs.
all right. It's also Putin's birthday, so happy
Oh
birthday.
no, Pyotr.
You
Anyways,
didn't know
not to
that?
make light of the situation, not to
No.
make light of the situation, but it was a depressing birthday last year because I hate to see these types of terrorist attacks and even just these kinds of conflicts. But I know that your analysis on what's happening in Israel and Gaza is going to be quite a bit more balanced than a lot of the media out there. So I'm going to start again with a very broad question. What's
Oh
your
yeah.
perspective on what is taking place in Israel and Gaza?
My perspective as someone who has followed and tried to be informed a little bit, or aware at least, of various global geopolitical events, has been rocked since October 7th. Ukraine was one major inflection point, inflection point being, major shock events or moments in political global history that, redefine the direction of certain macro things, right? And Ukraine was one because it illustrated that large scale kinetic warfare between a major power with nuclear capabilities is still possible. And October 7th was that, you know, the Israel Palestinian situation has been ignored for too long, has allowed to, what's the word, stew. And people sort of thought that the status quo would be sufficient. It wasn't. I want to make it very clear that I'm not going to share necessarily personal perspectives on this. I'm just going to try to recount as many different perspectives as possible. I've not shared anyone on the internet my actual opinions about this because it's not my place to, and also because I just don't really know what to think. Russia Ukraine
Sure.
is more clear cut for me, but
Yeah,
Israel Palestine isn't. And it's not a cop out. It's just if you are of any reasonable mind and have any humility about your tool, then you will not pretend to know the answer. This isn't a prescription; it's a description or
mm,
descriptive answer. What I would say is that October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. October 7th was, from a Palestinian perspective, the result of many years of ill treatment, of unfair treatment, lack of being heard, and from people who are extremely on the fringe of that side, hardliners, is the apartheid state of Israel imposing a open air prison sort of style on them. The Israelis'
mm,
perspective of October 7th is a new normal has emerged, that no longer can they live in threat or fear of that happening again. 1,500 people being killed on that day is the largest since the Holocaust. And, even moderate Israelis or left leaning Israelis who were, largely opposed to, you know, conscription or military usage or whatever, have all come round to understanding that that is you can't that you can't continue in the same way. Something has to change. So we're at an
sure.
impasse whereby the middle is largely dispersed of people, in the sense of people on the pro-Palestinian side are staunchly against even the existence of Israel or what it's doing now, and those who are pro-Israel hardliners on that side are, we need to eradicate Hamas, and that comes at the cost of civilians. Unfortunately, that's war sort of thing. So I've spoken to many people about this on all sides of the spectrum, and I just come away having very little optimism about what really is feasible. The whole consensus
Yeah,
is, and what's interesting is there was a UN discussion about this, and a colleague of mine told me that even now there is even despite the Russian, you know, American non-existence relations, China, Russia, America, China, there is still a genuine essence of we believe in the two-state solution. I'm not saying whether I support, I'm just saying that that seems to be still, from the international community, whatever that is, still seems to think that the two-state solution is the only viable one. The problem I have with that is just its functionality and practical application. If you look at a map of 1967, how on earth does that work? How on earth do you connect West Bank and Gaza? How does that work in an economic sense? What, people going from Gaza to to West Bank, to work on a daily basis? They have to go through checkpoints, the security. How does Israel ensure that someone doesn't drop a car bomb? How does that work, just from a functionality perspective? It's not clearly defined borders where the north is Israel and the south is Palestine, and it's nicely neat, two separate things, and they don't have to crisscross. It's like, you've got like enclaves and exclaves. It was like the Bangladeshi Indian situation from a few years ago, which was remarkably resolved peacefully, right? Israel says it's going to do what it has to do. The Americans are going to support them to a point, but they've now started dropping air provisions into the Gaza Strip, whilst at the same time continuing to veto peace ceasefire suggestions, resolutions, which is, you could get aid in if there was a ceasefire, but because America doesn't want to be seen as not supporting Israel, or the Biden administration at least, they're in this weird situation where they're doing this, but at the same time doing that. Everybody who is anti-West is jumping on this as a bandwagon to show how bad America is. Some people think America is as isolated in some ways internationally as Russia was in the early days of the Ukraine war. That's me paraphrasing a colleague of mine. And generally, I don't know what the pathway forward for this is. I think what has to happen is a ceasefire needs to be established at some point, like now. Israel has largely flatlined Gaza at this point. It's a conundrum that we need to sort out. There needs to be a solution, but Hamas can't be in the picture from Israel's perspective. But Israel doesn't trust PA, the Palestinian Authority. But Ghazian people don't trust Palestinian Authority either, because they haven't stood up for their rights. They haven't stood up for their interests. And so from the Palestinian perspective, they think that, Hamas is the only one that's willing to go to the extent to support their interests, which is why, Hamas has been in power for that so long. The PA is more of a political arm, yeah, but they're not willing to be aggressive enough to be defined in the face of what they consider to be Israeli oppression. So I think it starts with a ceasefire or truce. And from what I understand, reading news today and the past couple of days, there could be a potentially 5-week truce on the horizon. And that's a start. But that's not the end of it, because then you've got to talk about the day after tomorrow. And there are parts of Israelis that don't want to talk about the day after tomorrow, which I think is a mistake, because Gaza's non-existent now. Who's going to fund the rebuilding? How's it going to work? The Israelis want to install a deeper perimeter around it to prevent, this happening again. They want to securitize everything. There's so many questions. And again, it comes also down to me, the long-term viability of a two-state solution. Just geographically, pragmatically speaking, it looks really hard. So my perspective is really, really mixed. And wish that this was simpler to resolve. The problem is it's involving a non-state actor, proxies, i.e. Iran and its non-state actor groups, a country that isn't a country that isn't fully recognized as a country by everyone, i.e. Israel, and the long-term remnants of creating a state without considering the long-term consequences, which ultimately comes back down to the Balfour Declaration and the British. So it's the British fault, as so many things in history.
Yeah. Well, and maybe the solution is 3 states.
3 states, no
But
state, 1 state. It's, yeah.
so, Piotr, we'll talk about more world politics, but it's been great to host you for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. It's been great. Sorry I went on a bit there. It's the one thing that I, as a geopolitical follower, have largely avoided for so many years, because there's never really anywhere you can go with the conversation, you know what I mean? I was sitting at home all of us, I mean, not just us too, talking about, well, this is what should ultimately happen is very difficult when the people on the ground, the Israelis feel like they do, but now the Gazans are experiencing what they're experiencing. It sometimes makes me wonder whether or not I should do this or just talk about, my favorite places to go on holiday, top 10 places to eat eat a Big Mac, or, the top 10 most cool
I know.
McDonald's, you know what I mean? It's just like easier content that's not as controversial. So kudos to you for having the show and doing what you're doing as well. I really enjoy your pieces as well. So it's been a pleasure to be on, and thank you.
I'll refer everyone to your YouTube, The Global Gambit, which is blowing up right now, and then also your Twitter at P Kurzin, Kurzin, which is also blowing up. And then, yeah, we'll get back together soon. It's been great to host you, Pyotr.
No, absolutely. Yeah, lots of things coming up. We just had the Iranian elections, the Russians in 2 weeks, and yeah, got lots to come up. So if you enjoy, nuance and you appreciate what I said, hopefully it was as balanced as possible. Inevitably, I'm going to have biases somewhere. Then, love to have you as part of the community, and I'm always open to feedback and suggestions for guests and ideas, content. So, but thanks a lot, Chris, and speak to you soon.